Welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. In our episode today, we are meeting Savannah Burton. She is a mom of two and a therapist at My Memphis Therapist Counseling and Consulting. She's sharing with us today her personal experience and some of what she's hoping for other moms to understand. One part of that is that not all people love pregnancy, and that is a really common experience that not a lot of people talk about. There's a lot of shame and silence around how difficult pregnancy can be. So I appreciate that she's bringing that into our episode today. She talks about her experience through postpartum anxiety and really the challenge of balancing it all, especially in her experience having two different experiences after each birth. Savannah is a University of Memphis alumni, postpartum anxiety advocate, and survivor. She is passionate about maternal mental health and fortunate enough to be able to live out her dream of helping others as a therapist and as an entrepreneur. So let's get into it and meet Savannah. Welcome, Savannah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Kat.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on and for you to be sharing your story in particular, because as you know, so many people deal with postpartum anxiety and aren't always aware that that's what's happening. I think that's a lot of us aren't really aware that that's what's happening. Um, so I'm grateful that you want to share your story with us and how you're helping people now. So yeah, please feel free to start wherever you'd like with your story.
Sure. I have two boys. My oldest just turned 8, and he was born in 2015. And you know, I I'm also a therapist. I treat a lot of moms in the therapy setting, and one thing I've learned that's a common theme is really no one can prepare you for what comes after the birth of your first child. Everybody says, sleep when the baby sleeps, which is a whole nother issue in itself, or, prep food and all of these things. But there's really not a lot of talk around the emotional side that comes
hmm
after
hmm
birth. And sometimes the birth in itself can be
Yep.
traumatic, which mine was there too. And I can
hmm
talk about that in a minute. But we had everything set and the nursery and, just baby showers and family, and everything was ready. And then we had him, and it was like I got hit by a freight train.
hmm
Um, and honestly, my husband too,
hmm
looking
hmm
back at it, I really think, I know there's a lot of research coming out saying, men can suffer from PPD as well. And just being a clinician looking back, I really think he had some touches of that. We just didn't know at the
Right.
time. But we both really, really struggled. So it was a case of, it wasn't just me, it was me and him kind of
mm
going, what did we just do?
mm
Um,
Right.
this is a really not good decision.
hmm
How are we going to do this? I remember just both of us being up in the middle of the night one
Yeah.
night. We were both just crying. Like,
mm
it was probably night 2 or 3, and couldn't get him to go to sleep. And, the days and nights are flip flopped. And
Right.
it was really wild. Um, and that too, I mentioned a traumatic birth.
hmm
I ended up having a C-section, which, is never planned your first go around. Um, and, did the whole epidural thing, and it wore off. Did
Oh.
a second one, it didn't take.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So, by the end of it, I'm feeling everything. It was like really like an out of body experience. When I look back at it, I've just never been in that much pain in my life. And um I like to say I'm a pretty tough cookie, so I don't say that lightly, but
Right.
yeah, and then we had a nurse leave us because somebody was in distress in the room next to us. And so like my husband was just like left to like kind of manage the whole thing. And um
This is during the C-section?
This is during I pushed for about 3 to 4 hours.
Uh-huh.
And he was almost 9 pounds. He's a big boy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm 5'2".
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't happening.
Right.
And then
I
eventually
hear you.
they were like, okay, we've got to get him out somehow. When they pulled him out finally, they're like, yeah, you wouldn't have gotten his head out. He's, it's huge.
Mhm.
But you don't know that. You don't know
You
how
don't know that.
that goes. I've never done this before.
Right.
And yeah, so during the labor, she just said, I'll be back. And maybe it was not that long, but to us it felt like an eternity,
Oh, for
like
sure. Yeah.
where's our medical staff?
Yeah.
And then my blood pressure would tank and the whole
Oh,
team would
no.
rush in and put a mask on me, and
Oh.
we didn't know what was happening, and just a lot of unexpected, this is not what I envisioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
and
no, not at all.
it's not that I was like, I want to have this kind of birth with this song on, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the birthing ball, and I knew I cannot be rigid about this. I was very open-minded, but it still was just so different
Mm-hmm.
than what I thought it would be.
Gosh.
Yeah, and then,
Okay.
trying to recover from a C-section is a
Mm-hmm.
whole thing in itself too,
Mm-hmm.
on top of the newborn phase, and having a husband that is in just as much shock as I am about, oh my gosh, like, who let us be in charge of this little thing? You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, for sure. And this, I mean, you're both still recovering from all of the traumatic things that just happened. You in that much pain, and him seeing what was going on and not knowing what was going on as well. And if I can just like touch back real quick on, you said the first epidural wore off, and then the second epidural didn't take, and then that was during this C-section.
No, so we actually had gone in, this was our third night going into the ER,
Mm,
because in labor and delivery, because I was having contractions and they kept sending me home. And the third night we went in and they said, or it was early in the morning, and they said, okay, you're going to have a baby today. And they started me on Pitocin to kind of get things rolling. Um, and so during that whole process, they gave me, I was progressing. So they said, do you want the epidural? And I said, yeah. And that was the plan all along. And after a little while, it started wearing off. And then they said, okay, do you want to try another one? And we did. And it did not work. So
mm,
the latter half of all the pushing and the contractions and everything, there was no pain management.
mm,
On
mm.
top of being on Pitocin, which, heightens all of that,
Yeah.
um, was just, that's when I say like out of body.
Mm,
So when
mm.
they did the C-section, they actually did a spinal tap.
Got it.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I was a little worried that you were feeling the C-section also. And but
No,
yeah.
yes. So
Okay. Right. So this
I,
is a long process, and you're working really hard to during labor, and then at some point it became uh, clear to the medical team at least that a C-section was needed.
yes, it was not
Um,
an emergency C-section, but there was no progression,
mhm,
after a certain point. And
mhm,
actually, my firstborn, his head was so big. When we took him for his pediatrician appointment, the week prior post, he said, his head circumference is really off the growth chart, and I'm concerned. I'm kind of concerned. So
mm,
we need to make sure, like, he kind of dips back down and gets back in the curve,
mm,
or we're gonna have to send you guys for some scans. So
mm.
like,
Geez. Okay. So right, it's like one thing after another after another, and that
mhm,
that pediatrician appointment is like within a couple of days.
yes. And so I was like, wow. I mean, in a weird way that validated me because I was like, okay,
Mm,
like his head is really big and
mm,
like, because I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this baby out?
mm.
Um, so in a strange way that was validating, but
Yeah, yeah.
also, it's like, oh my gosh, do we have a whole nother problem on our hands? Which it ended up being fine. But that's some scary stuff to hear, a couple days post birth for sure. Um, and then, after that, I took 3 months off and we had planned for the whole maternity leave. Um, my short-term disability was denied. Yeah. So after thinking,
What?
okay, I'm gonna have these 3 months like paid, 60%. Yeah, apparently I signed up after my like pregnancy test. Yeah. So,
What?
uh-huh.
So they denied it. What was the reasoning?
So
Oh my gosh. What in
the
the what?
yeah, the confirmation of pregnancy was like, I guess prior to it being active, like for the open enrollment period. Yeah, it
What?
was just a nightmare.
What is oh this
I know.
makes me want to scream. Why is this happening to people? Why did it happen that you didn't deserve that? Oh my God. Okay,
No.
so like it's just you're one thing after another.
One thing I
Disappointments and
yeah,
confusion and oh gosh.
yes. And uh, prior to me having him, I had had a breast reduction in college. And so there was always a thought of like, I don't know if this is going to affect me breastfeeding.
Hmm.
We really don't know until it happens. And while I was able to breastfeed for 6 months, which was, I still can't believe I went that long, but um, the start of that journey was really, really, really rough.
Mm, hmm.
I had to use a nipple shield the entire time.
Mm,
And, we didn't even know what a nipple shield was.
right.
Like, and I have this lady coming to me in the hospital going, try this and go to Target and stock up on these. And I'm sending my husband to Target to buy nipple shields and he doesn't know what size. And,
Right, right.
you're like, how did we get here? This
Mm-hmm.
is just
Mm-hmm.
wild.
Mm-hmm.
Which really proud of myself for sticking with that for so long because it was not easy using that thing, you
Mm-mm.
know, every everywhere you go. But um yeah, just a lot of hiccup. I will say I never felt disconnected from him. So I never felt disconnected from Ethan, my son,
Mm-hmm.
as an infant. I always, you hear a lot, especially with PPD, like that disconnection and it takes a while to bond. I never experienced that. I was bonded. So throughout all of this, I did have this like deep internal connection to him, even though it was so hard.
Yeah.
So I will say I didn't have that speed bump. But what I think happened is all of these things kind of set up the perfect foundation of just feeling super anxious about
Right.
everything moving
Mm-hmm.
forward. And
Mm-hmm.
right before I got pregnant, I um, discovered that I had anxiety. So I always
Mm,
kind of knew, like, you know, what anxiety was a little bit, but I wasn't a clinician yet. And I didn't really get it. And
mm,
finally, I did some work around it and was like, oh, okay, this is what this is. And I got started on medication and like felt so much better. And then like the next
mm-hmm.
got pregnant. So didn't
Oh
didn't
gosh.
have a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
to really like explore what this could be like pregnant and having
Right.
a baby. And
Right.
also didn't love being pregnant. It was not
Mm,
fun for me. I was very, very sick. Um, but fast forward to him being here. it just started turning into I can't sleep. And every time he goes down, I just, I was laying there paralyzed, anticipating him to wake up
Mhm. Yep.
instead of trying to sleep or doing the dishes or
Mhm.
resting or whatever it is. That became my new normal is I'm going to try to do something, but I literally can't move because like he's going to wake up and start crying again.
Mhm. So like constant vigilance, anticipating him waking up, needing to be available to him right away.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
And
So,
like just the crying, just like that stimulus
mm,
produced like a physical response within me. Like it
yeah.
just,
What did it feel like for you?
oh my gosh, like nails on a chalkboard,
Hmm.
really.
Like painful. Like,
Painful, yes.
hmm.
And I couldn't let him cry.
Hmm.
And I remember I had a friend come over, she brought me some food, and um, we were talking about, taking the baby out or meeting at the park or just going to the grocery or something. And I said, I really can't do that. Like he's so fussy and he cries all the time. And she looked at me and she said, Savannah, babies cry. And I will never forget that. Like, this is so normalized to her that like
Hmm.
babies cry. Why isn't this normal to me? Like every
Mm,
time he cries, I'm having like internal panic.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when I started to realize, like, okay, maybe this isn't really at the level it should be.
Mm,
Um,
hmm.
and, you
At
know,
this point, did your husband know that this is what was happening for you, or were you dealing with this sort of silently?
no, he knew, but he was also kind of dealing with it too.
Mm, hmm, hmm.
And, it's so hard because you don't have anything to compare this to. It's like, is
Right.
everybody this anxious?
Right.
You
Hmm.
kind of think so for
Hmm.
a minute.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
we're sleep deprived. We're just in survival mode. And so we really didn't, we really didn't know that it was abnormal for a while
Hmm.
until I mean, I'm in this field and I got educated and I can see now now I have another son, like the differences um, in that postpartum journey versus the first. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, and I think that we both just kind of fed off each other too. You know,
Oh gosh, right.
Like he would be anxious and didn't know what to do, and like I remember one time I finally got to go, to like a Mexican restaurant with my friends for an hour, and it was just text after text, like I can't do this. He's
Oh.
crying.
Mm.
Yeah, just um very frustrated with himself. Like I don't know if I can, take care of him. He's so
Mhm.
small and I don't know the
Mhm.
right things. And just that
Mhm.
that confidence level with both of us just was not there yet.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it's
And it's
so
really
hard.
hard too when you're both going through something at the same time. Even without having a baby in the mix, when you're both going through something at the same time, it's hard because sometimes you can rely on the like, okay, I can't do this right now, and you can rely on the other person to pick up some slack, and then vice versa. But when you're both going through it, and both of your internal resources are so limited, it just adds to that like feeling of panic or the feeling of overwhelm. It like magnifies everything.
Yeah, yeah. No, it really did. And then, you know, I know this is a theme now, but I kind of jokingly say it, but there is no one person that probably gets on your nerves more than your partner or your spouse after have a baby. When you're awake and they're snoring, or
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
just
Yeah, you just took me back. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
It's so
The
frustrating.
resentment is there,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
it's so common, and it usually fades. But that was. that was there, which I think is somewhat normal. But then on top of us both being so um, kind of shocked and anxious about Ethan, that further disconnected us too.
Yeah, right.
So that was really hard. He would be checked out and we weren't having, our time, and that's turned upside down. And I remember going to the pediatrician. He was like, okay, it's been 3 months. Y'all need to go on a date. It's time for a date night. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, we're still in survival mode. Like, I can't
Right.
even think about that.
Right.
I'm like, are people like doing date night again now? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that took us back. That took a long time to get back connected. And honestly, I mean, that's why my sons are 4.5 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
Was terrified
Right.
to have another child. I don't want to go through pregnancy again. What if I have to have another C-section?
Mm-hmm.
That whole, honestly, first year, and especially first couple of months, was just so hard, and it really traumatized me. It took
Yeah.
a lot of work, around the both of us to finally get to a point where say, okay, like, what would be in our control if we did it again?
Mm.
What could we prep on the front end, if anything? How could we do it differently, having the insight we have now?
Right. How long would you say and maybe your husband too, but how long would you say you were in this like heightened state of anxiety before you knew what was happening or got any kind of support to get out of it?
Um, Honestly, I really think the first 2 years, to be honest, were just
Mm,
not like I wasn't back to baseline. I mean, it got easier as that went on, but even daycare, I was terrified about, there was so much guilt about, because I was a working mom, I still am. Um, why am I taking my child and dropping him off with strangers at 3 months old? That's
oh,
awful. And the shame and the guilt. And I would cry all the way to work.
mm,
Um, but the thing is, I didn't want to stay home with him either. I
right,
wanted to
right.
work. I love working.
Mm-hmm,
I'm a professional.
mm-hmm,
So there was this constant like pull of, you're horrible, you can't stay home with him, but you don't want to. And like, how do you balance that and make it all work? And it took me a few years to kind of get that under control and
mm-hmm,
stop worrying about, am I messing him up by taking him to daycare? And am I strapping him in the car seat correctly to the T every time I get in?
oh, I see. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Like
um,
everything comes with a layer of worry.
everything's a checklist.
Yeah.
Yes. Um,
Mhm.
is he like, let me just watch him like a hawk every time he eats something, in case there's like a moment where I'm needed, which I mean, there is some truth to that, but it's when it gets to this level of extreme, that's when it's not okay. And I mean, I was a runner. I worked out. Self-care has always been very important to me. That all went out the window. Um, and so I knew, like, I'm not myself, but I'm also not doing the things to like try to take care of myself.
Mhm.
And something has to change here.
Right. Right. So that like kind of paralyzed sort of feeling lasted throughout that whole time. Like was did the anxiety also get in the way of doing things for yourself, like things that you would have normally done in the past because of the worry, because of the vigilance for him? Uh-huh.
Most definitely. I mean, one other thing I really struggled with too was like scheduling, infants go to sleep so early. If I got off at, 4:35, it was like, you're horrible if you go to the gym after work because then you're missing the few hours that
Mm,
you have with him. And so I couldn't bring myself to do that because I was feeling so anxious and guilty about
yeah.
that time. But then I was so sleep deprived, I couldn't get up in the morning
Yeah.
and do it. And, it's just like, how do I create a life where like I'm functional again,
Hmm.
really, and,
Hmm.
and work and take care of him, but also spend time with him, connect with my husband, all of those things. That was really, really hard because I think as moms, we tend to put ourselves last and
Right. Right.
it it catches up with you.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. It does. Especially the longer it goes on, the harder it can feel to get out of that cycle. Was there something for you that happened, or a realization, or something that you came to that kind of helped you realize that, or was it like a slow realization?
Um, it was honestly probably a slow realization. Changing jobs really helped. I did leave a job that I was going to like an 8 to 5 that was not very flexible when I had him, and
Mm,
got the opportunity to do something that had a mix of, working from home and kind of making my own schedule when I needed it. And that really, really let me step back and see, like, okay, you can be a working mom and have a career and take care of yourself. Like, even if you're, going on a 20-minute run or walk on your lunch break, like, there are ways to do this. Some of it was the structure that you were in that you couldn't help. And that, like, those environments needed to change a little so you could have some wiggle room to figure this out.
mm, mhm, mhm. Right. If you don't, if you don't even have time to really think past what the next thing on your list is that you need to do, how can you figure stuff out?
Right.
It's so
Right.
important to have that time to be able to just let some things sink in.
Yes. And honestly, I've taken that premise and like that is how I structure my life now.
Nice.
If I cannot take on a professional gig or project while I'm taking care of myself during the day, because I do those things while my kids are at school most of the time. I'll go to the
Yeah.
gym or do the grocery shopping then or use Instacart. And so I'm not taking away from the time from them, but I'm still
Right.
not rushing and like being a complete psycho trying to get it done.
Mm,
Um, if I can do all that and have space for projects, I do it. If I'm
mhm.
not getting any of that stuff done, I have to say no to projects.
That is a great measure.
Hmm. Because
Uh, uh,
something is going to fall eventually.
mhm.
And then how do you get back in that routine if you've just added all this stuff back on your plate?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's really hard to, if at all.
Most definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that you learned along the way was this, like how to preserve yourself in the middle of all that's going on.
Yeah. And just, everybody kind of, I'm a firm believer. Everybody kind of has their thing that centers them or grounds them when they're stressed or anxious. And for me, it is moving my body. It has always been that way. And just getting back to those roots of, I'm gonna pull my kid outside in a high chair and he's gonna watch me while I lift weights for 20 or 30 minutes. Like doing those little things
Mm,
consistently makes me such a better human.
Mhm.
and a better mom and
Yeah.
a better therapist. And I have realized those little things I cannot let go. And that's what I try to teach my clients a lot is those little things are usually the first to go, right? Because in
Oh,
our
yeah.
mind, it's tiny, right? Oh, I'll work out tomorrow.
Mhm,
Oh,
mhm,
I'll prep my salads another day or, look at the budget later or whatever.
mhm,
Um, but that's usually the glue that
mhm.
keeps us together. And so shifting my mindset of, okay, we're going to say no to this birthday party because I haven't done my stuff this week,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
I need to fill my cup up. Like,
mhm.
that's really hard to shift. And to some people, it seems kind of silly, like, oh, you can work out anytime or you can, but like,
Mm-mm.
uh-uh.
Nope. I mean, right. And to your point that you said earlier, that's part of what happens is that the things that are flexible get moved around so much that they end up off the list entirely. Um, and also, I think people don't include their like level of exhaustion and need for just rest to do nothing. You might think you can exercise later, but what if you're in a space where rest is actually what you need in that moment? Anyways, it's yeah, just the constant trying to move stuff around and figure out how to run your life can be hard, and we do tell ourselves those things like, "Ah, it's fine, I'll do it later."
Yeah. And
Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't.
right. And you also have to know yourself. I mean, I
Mm,
know if I don't work out by 5 o'clock every day, it's not happening.
mm,
I've learned that about myself.
mhm,
And also know that I am a doer. It's hard for me to rest. I usually say yes to things and figure it out later. So just
mhm,
being more intentional about putting things on my plate and just knowing myself. I know I'm not going to get up at 5 a.m.
mhm,
So meeting myself where I'm at because I do need the sleep, you know, not much more than that, but if I wake up at 7 and then fit in a workout during the day, that's actually healthier to me than trying to force myself to do the whole 5 o'clock thing and fail probably 4 or 5 times out of the week
mm, mhm.
and beat myself up. Maybe in another season of life I can do that,
For sure. Right.
but not now.
Right. Yeah.
So making it work for where I'm at now. And
Mhm.
I've scheduled my whole business around that too. I it's really important to me that I pick up my kids from school every day. Now I have a school age kid, and that's always just been like, okay, by the time he's in kindergarten, I'm gonna
Mhm.
figure it out where I have a job where I can pick him up from school, um, and I did that. I structured my whole practice when I opened it in 2021. I'm not gonna take clients after 3,
Mhm.
and I stuck to it, and that allowed me to pick him up and be present with him. It's a 10-minute drive, if that.
Mhm.
It's nothing, but
Mhm.
that time is what was priority to me.
Right.
And if I have to get back home, come home and pick back up and do some things, okay. But like just knowing what fills up my mom cup
Mhm.
and working my day and my schedule around that. And I know that's not possible for everybody. Um,
Well, sure. And yeah, it might not be, but there are decisions like that that people can if you kind of step off of the treadmill for a second and from like running from thing to thing to thing and really think about what's my ideal flow of the day, the week. You might not be able to do all of it, but some of it you might be able to.
yeah, and it can be real tempting. I've had tons
Hmm.
of clients go, "Hey, I really want to come see you. Can you do a 5 p.m.? And, I'm like, oh, man, like, especially when you're just getting started and you don't want to say no, it's hard because
Oh, yeah.
that's income and your foundation. But, um, I really had to ask myself, like, why are you doing all of this? Like, why did
Mm,
you turn your life upside down and create a business and, um, really take a leap? And the answer was to have time for myself and my kids and my
right.
business, right?
Right.
To have a better balance of all that. So that theme and that like premise has really carried me far. Like that's my non-negotiables and I still
Hmm.
do it.
Nice. So if you can a little bit, tell me how you went from whatever you were doing before into, you know, the therapy world and all of that, and then very specifically supporting um, moms and families.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I got my master's of counseling in 2010. So I've been in the field for a bit. Never really, I think nowadays people graduate and they're interested in just private practice straight away, but that was not where I was. I worked in
Oh, okay, cool.
acute hospital settings, very intense days and
Yeah,
behaviors and honestly it was really hard. I'm so grateful for it though because it just taught me so much. I don't think my business would be where it is now without that experience.
hmm,
um but after about a decade I started dabbling into private practice and um worked for other people, and then COVID hit and I had always had this dream of I want to go out on my own, and then telehealth became a thing.
right.
Um, and that was right. So I had my second child December of 2019, so right
Mm,
before the pandemic hit.
right.
Um, so he's an infant, and I'm on maternity leave, about to go back to work, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is the world shut down, but like telehealth's happening. Um, and it really got my wheels turning. So I ended up I didn't have it like an office space, right? People weren't coming in person, but I have two kids at home and a husband working from home and a
Mm,
dog. So like,
mm.
where do we do session? So, that could
Mm,
shut the door. So I went to like a shed place and bought a shed, and I had it converted, drywalled, and an electrician come, and I just made my own little setup and I started my own thing doing telehealth out of my backyard.
nice.
Yeah, and quit my full-time job and eased into that, and then now it's grown into, I have 4 clinicians under me and an assistant, and we're about to actually move into a new bigger space here in a couple months that'll be just ours
Nice.
with more offices. And yeah, I mean, it's just like the growth is phenomenal. But really, what drove me into the postpartum clinical world was my own experience.
Hmm.
I mean, I had no interest in that before becoming a mother. Like
Right.
I was never a kid person. Let me hold your baby. That was not me. People see me now and they probably can't believe that because I'm like, give him to me. Um,
Right.
But, that was just never where I saw myself. And then I went through all this and, just thought like, I feel like I can help other moms. And there was also here in Memphis, not a lot of providers that
Mm,
even offered those services. I mean, there was, I think, maybe one PMH-C.
mm.
So I decided, I'm going to go and get my PMH-C and did the certification and all of that, but really just drove home. I'm not only a practice for moms and postpartum women, but that definitely a big piece of it. And if you need it, we're here.
That's great. Um, yeah, especially when you see the gap. Um, A lot of people aren't getting the help that they need to be able to provide that in ways that you didn't have and could have used is rewarding just on its own to know that you can help other people.
Yeah, and recently I've had probably two or three clients, and it's so funny how things mirror, your experience, but they've had awful just first postpartum experiences, and now I'm seeing, them pregnant for the second time, and then have their second child and have this second postpartum experience. Well, it's still, well, it looks so different
Mm-hmm.
in a good way. And
Mm-hmm.
that just that fills my honestly my mom cup and my professional cup up.
Right.
It just like it's possible. A lot of people come to me, they're like, I can't have another kid. This is awful. And I mean, that's exactly how I felt.
Right.
Uh, but it is possible to have a completely different postpartum experience. It's never going to be easy, but
Mm-hmm.
there are things you can do to set you up differently,
Yeah.
and there's more resources now. We
Mm-hmm.
still have ways to go, but there's a lot more out there. I feel like
There
OBs
is.
being more informed. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot going on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And COVID also helped in some way because the need was so great for people to get support from home that more and more services became available online. So even people who are in rural communities or who aren't at a city center where there are more resources available can find anyone in their state if they have internet. It can can get to somebody who can help them or a support group, and it's really cool. That's the one good thing from COVID.
It is. It is. And honestly, too, I think COVID, I had a lot of moms that, had COVID babies and were so isolated.
Mm,
Um, and like working that was just unprecedented. Like it's already isolating enough, but now like you can't even have your parents come visit you. Like, oh my, it's
it was
unfathomable.
horrible.
Yeah, but it exposed the the hardness of this
Mm,
postpartum period and era that like I think I don't know if maybe it needed more exposure or more people were talking about it or all of the above, but you're
yeah,
right, it really helped in that regard.
right. So with, in all of your journey, what you've learned, what you know personally and professionally, what are the things that you're really wanting moms to know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I think please speak up. There's so much shame around this, and
Hmm.
the whole what's wrong with me? I can't do this and I'm a bad mom. And um really I want them, if anybody's going through that, it doesn't mean you're a bad mom. There's something else going on, and there are people and professionals that can help you. And this is really more prevalent and common than we talk about.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people think I'm the only one, and that is just not the case.
Yep.
Uh, so, speak up. There are resources, and talk to your partner. I see that a lot is the shame and kind of transfers into I can't tell anybody this, including my husband or my partner.
Hmm. Hmm.
And um it starts there too. Nobody knows what you're going through unless you say something. And even if you and your partner are feeling disconnected, I've been there. That is temporary. There are so many ways that you guys can get back and find your new normal. Yes, it's a transition and it takes time.
Yep.
But just because that's the state of your marriage or relationship the first couple of months or a year or two after a baby doesn't mean it's the permanent one, you know.
Yes.
Um, and find other moms, find support. That's the biggest thing.
Yep.
I know PSI has groups and things like that, but if you don't have a tribe, and I really hate that word, honestly. I hate it because it's like,
Hmm.
your tribe. Well, not everybody's blessed with a tribe, you know. Um, but we can all work on finding it.
Yeah. Right.
You know, some it's harder than others, but get
Even
in.
if it's just one other person that you feel safe with, that can be a lot.
Yeah, sometimes that's all it takes is one person,
Hmm.
a neighbor,
Hmm.
uh, a a church friend, or maybe look in places that you didn't expect to find mom support,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, those are really, really important. And hopefully people can hear that. It can be hard to do, but it is worth the effort. You are worth the effort and the time. And I think a lot of people who are hearing your story will be able to resonate with so many of the things you're describing and how that anxiety shows up. And I appreciate you sharing because I know it's going to help other people.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for letting me, speak on this, and it's so important and dear to my heart, and I just hope it helps somebody.
I'm sure it will. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Cat. I appreciate it.
Feel free to connect with Savannah on Instagram at My Memphis Therapist or her website, mymemphistherapist.com. It is so important that you guys are sharing these episodes. It really has an impact. And I see it on the back end when I see download numbers and episodes like this that continue to be listened to well after the episode has gone out, because so many people can identify with things like postpartum anxiety and need to hear their story reflected somewhere out in the world. And these stories are a part of that shift into making perinatal mental health more understood and reducing the shame that some people experience when dealing with a perinatal mental health condition. The best way that you can support the work that I do is to share these episodes and follow along and support the posts that are on Instagram at Mom in Mind. For anyone out there who is suffering, you can go to my website, wellmindperinatal.com, and go into the courses section and see what is available. There are several small bite-sized courses that are really user-friendly, can help you understand your experience, as well as give you some tools to cope with what you might be going through. I'm so happy to be able to provide this podcast to you, as well as the other resources that are available. I hope that you find them useful and supportive in your healing journey as well. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time.